Oh, good day, everyone. I'm Mike McCammon. I'm the Executive Director of the NFC Forum. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar about the circular economy and how NFC plans to play some role into the future of the digital product passport. This session is being recorded, so if you'd like to come back and watch this later, it will be hosted on our website as early as later today, most likely tomorrow, but I'd encourage you to take a second chance and share it with your colleagues when you have an opportunity. Let's go ahead and go on to the next slide. Very quickly, from a housekeeping point of view, as by default, all attendees are muted by the organizer. There is a questions pane. We will be trying to take some questions towards the end of the session. If you'd like to join in on that conversation, you can. Obviously, the audio pane allows you to switch between how you want to hear this particular conference. And then if you want to, like I've mentioned, you can always use the questions tab to ask questions. If we get to them, it'd be great depending upon the amount of time we have at the end of the session. Next slide, please. We do have a great deal of content to cover, so I'm going to keep these very brief introductions basically reserved for each of our panelists. I've mentioned my name is Mike McCammon. Kamala will go first, following myself. She's with Avery Dennison and Surpass. Suzanne will be coming after that. Jeannot, Pierre, and then Prati, all of them will be doing their introductions once we get to them, and then I'll do a quick roundup, and then we'll do our panel session after that. Next slide, please. Next slide. I do want to take just a few brief moments before we start. If you're unfamiliar with the NFC Forum, to give you a quick overview. The organization is comprised of over 500 member organizations, including some of the most familiar global technology consumer brands. We actively collaborate with ourselves and a bunch of other technical adjacent bodies to basically deliver on contactless. And always we welcome new members, and these are our current board members who lead the organization alphabetically from Apple through ST Microelectronics. Next slide, please. If you're not familiar with NFC technology, near field communication, it is standards-based, it's short-range wireless that makes our lives easier and more convenient. With a compliant range of up to 5 millimeters, it allows you to share power across the connection. It's being built into most everything, and of course, it's the technology that enables contactless payment that we all know and use today. The next slide, please. As it relates to the technology itself, it is quite convenient and very, very pervasive. The NFC Forum does a semi-annual study with ABI Research. We're actually in the process of commissioning that study this month as well, because we're on the 2-year cycle. The last time we did this study across all age groups, it was 2 years ago. 85% of consumers claim to use the technology beyond mobile payment. Public transit is another key driver of the use case for the technology. And in fact, when we did the study, even as long as 2 years ago, nearly half of consumers said that they prefer using their mobile phone or smartwatch over a contactless card, just demonstrating the ubiquity of the technology in our everyday lives. Next slide, please. So let's talk really quickly about the digital product passport, how NFC technology may play a role in it. The next slide, please. So when it comes to NFC technologies, it is from the start, a sustainable technology in many respects. The first one is the fact that NFC technology by design is power harvesting in nature. It's the only mainstream wireless technology today where only one side needs a battery. So in most other wireless technologies, both sides need to have power or a battery, whereas in the case of NFC, one side can harvest power from the other. It's a core design feature of the technology, and it's the reason why your contactless card does not need a battery for it to work, or a transit card, for instance. And this is a very unique feature for NFC technology, which makes it already a very first step along the path of sustainability. Another feature of the technology, because we do allow power harvesting, is we have a new standard that allows you to do wireless charging and power across that connection. It's a new standard for replacing single-use batteries in the smallest of devices that are out there. We also think it opens up new use cases for removing standby power in lots of devices. And then the final aspect of what we're looking at today for sustainability is around the digital product passport. As you'll hear from our presenters following, NFC as technology is already defined as one of the data carriers, which allows linking physical products to cloud-based DPP data. And the NFC technology already provides some very unique benefits over some of the other potential data carriers around security, validity, and of course, aesthetic freedom, since NFC can be embedded inside of a product and not have to have a visible sticker or something on the outside of a product. The next slide, please. All right, I guess this must be a build. Is there 2 bullets here? So the one thing that the applicability as it relates to a DPP ecosystem is that what the NFC Forum sees, because of the universal adoption of NFC Forum standards and specifications in consumer handsets, we think we are in a very good position to help define the global standards for how DPP might work in some of these ecosystems. We actually already have a work item that's being worked on in our standards group with a target release date of summer 2024 to enable this use case. Next bullet. And also the other thing that's in the process of being worked on is that the NFC Forum and its members are exploring ways we might actually put the DPP data and store it directly on the product in the same tag as a URL. We think that this would provide some additional unique benefits in the marketplace, and this is a current study item for our particular group as we look forward to the future of DPP and NFC technologies. Next slide. This concludes my introductory comments. Next slide will take us to, I think, the list of panelists, and then after that, I'll jump over to Kamala. All right, so those are kind of the quick overview of NFC and NFC Forum. And now I'll pass it off to Kamala, and we'll go from panelist to panelist, and I'll come back with some closing comments and panel discussion. So Kamala, I think you're up next. Next slide.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Mike, for an introduction. My name is Camila. I'm a part of Avery Dennison team, and Avery Dennison is obviously one of the members of the NFC Forum, but I'm here actually to represent CIRPAS consortium that we are a member of. So thank you also for inviting us and having us here. So if you can take it to the next slide, please. So what is CIRPAS? So CIRPAS is a consortium of 31 partners, which is funded by the European Commission. The idea and the objective of having a consortium is actually to build a common understanding around digital product passports. And the focus areas which we have been asked for by the European Commission is the textile, batteries, and electronics industry. So the whole project is set out for 18 months, and it's actually a research. It's gathering information, it's listening to businesses, listening to stakeholders, listing benefits, listing actually challenges that are connected to implementing digital product passports, and trying to put it together what we call a DPP puzzle. So if we go to the next slide, please. A definition of the digital product passport. So it seems that everybody has a different definition. So the definition that CIRPAS is actually proposing is that the digital product passport is an information system for the circular economy. So the whole business case behind the digital product passport is actually to drive sustainability, to drive circularity. And how can we achieve that? We can achieve that by collection of product information, product-related data with a different access rights for different purposes. Obviously, we have the business to business, business to customer, and how it can be all accessed, it's through a data carrier. So the data carrier in this case that we are discussing would be an NFC tag, it could be a QR code, there will be a separation, and there will be an advice by the European Commission which data carrier actually has to be used. But the whole intention of the DPP is to drive our circularity. If we can please jump to the next slide. And I think this is something that everybody is asking and wondering about. It's actually the timelines of the implementation of the digital product passports. So obviously, CIRPAS will finish and cease to exist at the mid-2024 with the recommendation of how we can make it all possible. And we are seeing that the first mandatory DPPs for batteries will be introduced in 2027. But all the other product groups that you are seeing here, the textiles, furniture, they are on the agenda of the European Commission. So they have a very ambitious plan to follow up beyond 2027 and spread the digital product passports across different industries and different product groups. And as you see, it's not only the end-use products, but it's also intermediary products like iron, steel, and we want to preserve all these raw materials. How can we do that? My friend Suzanne will follow with that discussion in a minute. If we jump to the last slide, please feel free to reach out to SEERPASS for any kind of information. We have a frequently asked questions on our website. There is a stakeholders group that you can actually join. So please feel free to reach out and let us know, and sound any concerns that you may be having as a business or any comments. And thank you so much again. Suzanne, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Camilla, for the nice handover. So my name is Susanne Gut-Orlowski. I'm sorry, I have a cold. I hope you can still understand me well. I'm an external advisor to the Global Battery Alliance on digital product passports, as well as advisor for the European Commission. I'm participating at most standardization activities around the digital product passport on the European level. And I would like to give you a short insight about the decentralized setup of the digital product passport, which is the first time that the European Commission is actually mandating a decentralized setup. Before that, they always had centralized platforms where everyone had to upload the information, and this changes with the digital product passport. So let me give you a few insights on how decentralized systems like that are set up. Next slide, please. So if you look at a decentralized setup, it is a little bit like in the old days. Think of you as an individual and what identifies you. It is usually your wallet that you walk around with, and in your wallet you have, a unique identity, your identity card, your insurance card, maybe your driver's license. And then you also have certificates with you, maybe at home also your diploma, something that you reached during your life, or tickets or the like. So all these informations are with you and identify you and describe you. And the reason why people trust those documents, your identity card, for example, for traveling, your passport or your driver's license, is because all those certificates have been issued by a trusted issuer, so by the government, by some institution that you can trust. And also those certificates have some security measures. If you look at your passports, there's a lot of biometric information on it today, so that people can see it is issued by the government, and it has all the security measures, so I can trust this information, and therefore I don't know, leave you cross a border or so. So that's also the concept that the digital product passport will be built on. It will be built on information that trusted third parties issue about a product, company, or a person that stay with that company, that stay with that person, stay with that product. And on request, you can actually ask for that information. But for this reason, we don't actually need centralized systems where everyone has to upload their information. This is the way that we can keep control over the data. You can also decide who you want to give access to. So maybe go to the next slide. What I already implied a little bit is that company identities are also identified and described by certificates that have been issued about them, which stay at their premise in their wallet, is kind of the technical term. For example, a company can have a greenhouse gas emissions report that has been issued by PricewaterhouseCoopers or by any other of the auditors. The company can have an ISO certification or a certification for textile exchange and so forth. Or any other certifications which stay with them and which kind of makes statements about that company. Next slide, please. And then finally, coming to our product identifier, also there's information that is being issued about that product, issued by the company who produces the product, or issued by institutions that have tested the product for quality, such as you can see on the left side, Ökotex, or the like certificates, which stay with the product, but which you can request to maybe allow this product to be placed on the European market, and that's all that it is about. And if you look at the next slide, please, you get an idea of how, with your product identifier, your decentralized product identifier, you get to all those verifiable product information. You basically carry around your product identifier in the NFC chip, and then whoever wants to access it takes the identifier, brings it to a resolver that resolves the product identifier, and it resolves it to a DIT document that then leads you to further information about the product. For a human readable use case on the phone, it might take you to the website of the digital product passport, where there's human readable information about the product, but it also might take you to a system, a service endpoint that issues the product information in a machine readable format, or shows the certificates in a machine readable format, signed by the digital or provided with a digital signature, and therefore is verifiable. So this leaves you a very flexible way of attaching information to your product and product identifier. And this is how the decentralized system is set up. The European Commission, of course, is asking to access that information to allow products to enter the European market, but the information stays with you, which gives you control over your data, and makes, hopefully enlarges also the acceptance of this digital product passport system. Next slide, please. There are a couple of regulations that point to the digital product passport. Of course, the first one is the new battery regulation, where the battery passport is defined for the first time. Here, maybe it's more relevant, the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products regulation, which mandates the product passport for several product categories, such as textiles, buildings, cosmetics, mattresses, and the products that we saw from Camilla earlier. There are also other regulations now referring to the digital product passport, such as constructions, toys, detergents, packaging, and so forth. So we will be seeing the digital product passport set up in a decentralized way, in many regulations, referred in many regulations, and therefore it is very important for the NFC industry to ramp up and be prepared to what's coming. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's basically already it. Please scan in the code if you want to get in touch. It's basically a LinkedIn profile where we can discuss more about the digital product passport if you I don't know, need detailed answers or still have open questions about the decentralized system and how it's being set up. Thank you. And now I'm handing over to Jano.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, thank you, Susan. So I'm going to talk about today about the product circularity data sheet, which is an original concept which we have developed at Positive Impact. Positive Impact being a private company where I have been the co-founder, and we are working on this now since 2018, because we believe that a circular economy without data is not really transforming the way we are doing business today. So data will be key if you want to manage better our resources in the future. We also decided that this product circularity data sheet should not be owned by a private company. That's why we handed over to the government of Luxembourg. So basically they support that initiative now, and they just created a company who actually will run this as an open system as far as possible, because, as has been mentioned by Susan, we need this decentralized system in order to make it happen. And for the NFC industry, I think it's important to know that this is also has now become an ISO norm. We are currently working on that norm. I will come back to it at the end. It's the ISO norm 59040, which is part of the work package ISO TC 323, which is all around circular economy, where there are definitions given, there are best practices given, there will be measurements given. So, and one of these packages about which data we want to attach to the data sheet. So please move to the next slide. So this looks like a quite complicated slide, but basically, if you listen very carefully to what Susan explained to you previously, this is actually how we look at this system, as it was explained by Susan, when we look at the supply chain, where at the end, the European Commission will, for battery, for example, look for the digital product passport at the manufacturing level, as you can see on the bottom part of this picture. We are also looking at what kind of data needs to go through the supply chain in a standardized way so that we speak all the common language. It's a little bit, again, like with passports. If we don't agree that there is a photo on and that there is a certain address on and a certain way of presenting a passport, this becomes an unusable document. Even if everybody issues its own document, we have to agree on a certain way how we want to exchange data, especially if we want to keep costs down and make it cheap and affordable. So that's basic idea of the product circularity data sheet. It gives a form on how the data should be structured, defining different chapters, and it's also based on statements describing different product features, all linked to product circularity, which is an additional data sheet through the certificate Susan mentioned, for example, which can be handed out by private companies. But this is like a universal way of exchanging data through the supply chain. And as has been said previously, it is very important as these products move along the supply chain or even in the end consumer market and ending up in the recycling chain. It's very important to link the data you have generated to the physical property of the product you have created. And that's where the NFC comes into play, because the NFC could well be this physical connecting point between the digital information and the product you have in hand. And this is obviously a very nice technology if we talk about expensive parts where data and where repair can be done, and it's data or equipment which is around for a very long time. So also NFCs could be used in the supply chain, again, for the same reasons, because on complex products, you will have components which will last for very long. And again, there, the NFC technology could help us to make this link between the data and the product along the supply chain through the system as Susan has described it. So we believe that if we move to the next slide, please, that actually under this ISO work, 59040, together with the NFC standard moving along with it, that we can create a standardized system which will really help to manage to get the cost down. Because as today, we see some pilot projects being done, but the costs are very high to generate all these data. And we need to find a way to get this cost down. And as always, there is nothing better than a standardized system, which we all agree on, that has to, so that we can leverage the cost and we understand the data we exchange, because we have a common definition of the wordings and the statement. And all this will really drive cost down, and which I also believe that this allows us a high level of automation to happen in the future, so that this data generation can be automated based on this system. So that's basically all I wanted to say. I mean, I could give you much more content about what the PCDS actually is and what is the inside of it and how it looks, but I think that's far beyond the scope of this webinar. I think it's more to show you that actually the software, as Susan describes, the content, as I described, and as Mike described, the technology from a hardware perspective, all these three elements need to come together in a nice, neat way so that we can actually scale it up, and by the scaling factor, really minimize the cost. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Pierre Muller. I'm at TM Microelectronic, where I'm leading the RFID business unit. And if you don't know that, EM is part of the Swatch Group, the watchmaker company. And as the EM business unit leader, we are in the company, we are focusing on the technology, and I'm also sitting in the board of directors for the RAIN Alliance. And I want to point out here a few of the key points that are on the technology and try to avoid a bit of the confusion that there might be between the NFC RFID technology and the RAIN or UHF RFID technology. So with that, maybe we can look into the second slide. Next slide, please. So NFC, we already have discussed quite a bit about that. I just want here the key points to contrast together with the RAIN RFID. It's both technology are fully passive and don't need battery for maintenance, but NFC is first and foremost a one-to-one communication system between a consumer and an item, and it's focusing on a short range reach distance, which is preventing stray reading between the different. You don't have too much risk to read several items on the NFC side, and it supports secure communication directly out of the box. That's prime technology for contactless payments, passports, but also consumer engagement and wallet protection or ticketing. So with that, we can move to the next slide and to the RAIN RFID technology. And this technology is also full passive, but the philosophy behind that is clearly different. It comes from the supply chain and the inventory management type of application with a focus to inventories hundreds of items in a split second, and with read distance of more than 10 meters. And that's why you will typically see sometimes, if you look carefully into the retail, or if you have self-checkout in some, for instance, Decathlon is having UHF self-checkout technology. This is used as well for electronic vehicle identifications, baggage tagging, or logistics. So the frequency is 900 megahertz rather instead of 13.56, and those technology are just supporting the different advantage that I described. And with that, maybe move to the next slide, please. As EM, we believe that there is such a variety of use case and of applications that not a single technology can have all the benefits for every use case, and that DPP will require also some combination of technology, whether you can think also about QR code or some others, but we can really combine, we should not think in the box of one capability, but think out of the box and see that sometimes there are things that are already deployed. RAIN is massively deployed in retail, for instance, NFC is massively deployed in smartphone, and combining them together can really deliver high value benefit for all the stakeholders on the supply chain. So that's really the perspective we come from when we built the EMECO chip. So the capability is already there, already the data carrier are already available to deploy and to do the pilot. And I believe that whether from a software perspective or from an hardware perspective, the technology is really there to enable the new use case for circularity and digital product passport. But I will leave the word to Preeti to drive us through those different possibilities that we have there.
Thank you, Pierre. So I'm Preeti. I'm responsible for partnerships and ecosystem management within the connected systems solution business within Infineon. Infineon is enabling digitalization and decarbonization with its microprocessors, sensors, low power communication and security chips. We believe semiconductors are crucial to solve the energy challenges of our time and to shape the digital transformation towards sustainable energy solutions. In the matter of decarbonization, European policy is quite ahead of other regions, and EU's eco-design sustainable product regulation and DPP is an example of this. Digital product passports, in my view, is the single most impactful initiative to enable a circular economy within Europe. Next slide, please. So to focus on the top opportunities that DPP provides, the whole purpose of DPP is to build a circular economy within the European Union. So it could definitely facilitate reuse of products and help with buyback, second life, and recycling of source material. In this time of resource scarcity, I do believe DPP could help recovery of raw materials such as lithium from batteries, just as one example. Having DPP could build transparency in many ways for all its stakeholders. For consumers, they get educated about the climate footprint of the consumed products, and perhaps this encourages responsible buying as well as recycling. For companies, it is about data through the lifetime of a product with the transparency that DPP could provide. Companies can get information on their products after sale till the end of life. This on the final stakeholder for DPP and ESPR, I would say, is for regulators, the transparency that it could bring on the sustainability goals. And we just heard about the various regulations that are there, and any taxation and any schemes like that, for example, also right to repair, it could help. So data is really key within DPP. And it needs, and its background, creation of an interoperable standardized infrastructure for such data exchange, which is also upholding the EU spirit for privacy and still enables access and transparency of data, perhaps following need-to-know principles. So in all of this, I feel NFC has a role. Because DPP could trigger new business models and use cases, leveraging the existing technologies and ecosystems that NFC Forum provides with its NFC technology. We could build a DPP service that opens all the above mentioned opportunities, I believe, with the use of such a technology. Last slide, please, from my side. Here are some coordinates to reach out to me if you have any questions, any comments. With this, I hand off to Mike.
All right, thank you, Priti. All right, we're going to start the panel discussion really quick, I think is the next slide, if I recall. I thought there was a slide with everyone's picture. So I guess I will not do the closing. We'll just do the panel discussion. I was going to have everyone's pictures there, but and it looks like Priti, are you still there, Priti? Yeah, she's still here. Good. All right. Well, as you can tell, there was a lot of ground to cover. I want to first thank all the panelists for shortening what is everyone's full hour presentation down to a short 5 minutes. I really appreciate that. It allowed us to cover a great deal of ground. I did, we had some questions, and I'll keep an eye on the questions tab. If you have a question, if we have time, we'll get to it. There are a couple that I do want to start us off with. And I'll start with Suzanne, and I'll kind of, and I'll do Jeannot after that, and then Camilla. So you've been very involved in actually doing some early implementations. And so I guess one of the questions I would start with Suzanne is, what do you think are some of the unique and other challenges the DPP is going to encounter that still needs to be resolved before we can get to some of these bigger deployments? Are there still some challenges, and what are those challenges?
The challenges is very likely not in the technology. I mean, we're now, we've created kind of the first verifiable digital decentral product passport and showed an example how it can work with the decentralized technology. So I think it's not a technology thing, although of course here some standardization work still needs to be done, which is starting now as a European Commission JTC group, and I'll be involved there. The standards mandate is, to be finalized this week. So there are still standards to be developed. I mean, we're trying to not to develop too many new standards, but trying to take standards that are available already. There's already been a landscape report on this potential standards, and now we try to narrow them down to a DPP system. So there is ways to implement it. We need standardizations. Of course, there are different industry forces because kind of everyone also wants to you maybe keep the way they're doing it today. They want to do it tomorrow with the digital product passport. So there will be some challenges to bring everyone on the same page to write the standards, maybe as one challenge. But then also the industry needs to get ready to basically prepare their data to make sure they find the data in their databases that needs to be published, and also define even more standards how companies exchange data with each other from one company to the next. And another big thing is the understanding of the technology approach, and therewith, you know, the trust into such a system, because a lot of companies are still very hesitant in the supply chain to actually give data. So they don't want to show anyone their supply chain first, or their vendors and the data that they exchange, because very often behind a successful product there is a very good supply chain, and that's usually very business confidential. So there's a challenge in the behavior and understanding, so we need to educate, and then there's obviously also still some standardization work to do until we finally get there in 2027.
Great. And you probably have seen some of these same problems. Would you add to these, or how would you modify what Susanna said as some of these interesting challenges still to be resolved?
If I unmute myself. Yeah, just to underline what Susan has been said, I'm convinced that it is less a technology issue than more about a personal belief or beliefs of an industry sector or the industries as such, because we are used in the past not to share data. I mean, a lot of people have built commercial success by not sharing data and keeping everything secret. So there is a lot of work to be done, as Susan had said, around education, trying to understand that the key to better management of resources is linked to the exchange of data. As Thomas Rau said, you can define waste as material without data. So you always have to remember that this is a very nice definition of waste, and that means whenever we sell a product basically to a consumer, we should all think about how much data we lose at that moment. It's just unbelievable. So the key is, how can we overcome this issue of keeping, obviously, business information confidential to a certain degree, and on the other way, come up with a common language that allows to exchange on a need-to-know basis the information. So that's, for me, also the key challenge to overcome. And we see this already happening now when we try to define the standards, because yeah, there are some really barriers to overcome in the definition of these standards, so that we don't create standards which basically doesn't contain any valuable information, because it still needs to be valuable information. And I think that's the key challenge. So how to protect business interests while managing exchange of valuable information to the marketplace. And I think we have to think in long term. So maybe the first version is not perfect. It's not about perfection. That's, for me, the other issue. I see a tendency of going for perfection, and we lose the standardization effect across industries and sectors because scientists want to make it a perfect system. And I think we have to be very careful about this and look at it first as a standard system, and maybe in the second or third iteration of the standard, bringing in perfection. Because it doesn't help us if we have a perfect system, but nobody is using it. So that's my biggest other addition to what Susan said. Let's accept imperfection, but let's get going with the standard. The standard is more important than perfection.
That's great. Kamala, from some of the work you've been doing at Surpass, what would you want to add or subtract or have comments on any of these?
I think pretty much Suzanne and Jenno actually mentioned most of that. I think from the challenges perspective, yeah, the readiness, not the technology, but the businesses itself. I think a lot of challenges are in the data collection, also in the infrastructure itself. So there is still definitely a lot of challenges beyond the standardization, but I think that nothing is really like non-doable. So I think we have seen similarities in all these implementations.
Great. Pierre, you have anything to add? And then I'll go to Prati last on this question.
So on the challenge, I think that will be really for people to understand how to use the technology more than the technology per se. The technology is there, but we also have new stakeholders that are not used to use and deploy this technology that come into the circularity ecosystems. I'm thinking about sorters, recyclers that are not the primary target until now of any of the technology provider, which are focusing either on the supply chain, manufacturing, or on the end user and on the consumer interaction. So the way I see it on the challenge side is really about people understanding how they can use the technology for their own use case and to develop their business with it, and also that they don't do it just to comply to the DPP regulations, but that they move one step further and that they go into understanding the opportunities that lies beyond that, and that having the DPP, they can enhance the trust, they can enhance the customer connection, and they can develop really new use case. But those use cases, they will face challenge. Typical question we have is what's the tap rate of if I'm putting NFC on my product? How many people will really tap on the product to get it? And such questions. And I think also that some of the deployment that have been in the past have been more driven by maybe the IT person or the manufacturing force, and here we need into the company that need to implement DPP a global understanding and many of the stakeholders of the company to align on the vision for the new challenge. I mean, marketing, the people from the sustainability, of course, the people from the IT, that people from the managing the ERP that will have access to the data. So they need to share this common vision, understand what they can do with the technology, or they can leverage DPP to go further into the new business case. And instead of getting, let's say, DPP as a cost to comply, get DPP as an opportunity to develop their business and foster more trust and new opportunities.
That's great. And Prati, real quick, from your perspective and from Infineon's, what do you see are some of the additional challenges that we still need to resolve to kind of be able to implement some of this, if there are any still?
Yeah. So from Infineon's perspective, what I see is the technology itself is there. It's the standardization of how we're going to organize this. And the work that we need to do on the DPP as the whole region within Europe, we need to figure out how we want to leverage these existing technologies, right? So the willingness is a huge challenge right now that we see. And I agree with Pierre, focusing on the opportunities that this would create to overcome this the initial resistance to DPP is going to be crucial. And this is true for businesses which are currently, as Suzanne and Camilla mentioned, they already are used to having data and keeping data with them. So to look at the opportunity and see how we can bring this together and ensure the bigger picture realizes in terms of letting DPP enable the circular economy. So for my company, this is we look at this as an opportunity, surely, but there is a lot of standardization needed before this becomes an opportunity for the entire industry and not just one or the other company.
Okay, good. You know, I'm going to skip around. I'm going to ask a question that I just saw here that I think is a really good question to ask people. And I'll go in reverse order of the speakers. So Prati, you'll go first. You know, I mean, so let's say that I'm watching this webinar and I'm pretty excited and I think I need to start doing something if I'm not already doing something. I guess the question would be is, what would you recommend be the next thing that our guests should be doing to get ready for the rollout of DPP, however long it might take? What would be the next few things they should be doing on their plate?
So the most important thing that we need to do right now is standardize how we're going to do the digital product passport data. And as I mentioned earlier, that is going to be key for a widespread deployment. So we do have the ISO 59040, which is working on this. That work needs to be done. We have the SIRPAS project, which is looking at this. That work needs to be done. For a wide-scale deployment within Europe, I believe we need to standardize, and we need to standardize hard across a broad section of products. So that is going to be key for, so that's the one thing. If I'm asked one thing that needs to be done, that needs to be done now.
Great. Pierre, what would you recommend if I'm watching this webinar and I'm interested? What would be the next few things that they ought to be doing to get more aware and learn how they might implement something like this?
One easy step is to get in touch with one of the panelists, I would say, that can help drive the discussions. But I would say you have to think first about what you need to achieve with the DPP and what are the challenge in your company, because that would be quite unique depending whether you're in a large company, in an SME, or depending also the segment, the type of product that you're doing. And I would recommend just to think about what are the critical activities that will be impact or that need to be concerted with the DPP, and then reach out to some of the organizations, whether on the technology side or more on the circular economy side for specific segment, just to see what's the technology that's there. And there's, I think, a large part of the technology is really existing today, that pilots are feasible today. And I would definitely recommend to get in touch with the most promising technology part as well. The NFC Forum could be the RAIN Alliance, or it could be some other standardizations body that have white paper, that have resources to help for understanding really in the practical what is DPP about and how we can do it for different type of products. And that will be quite different depending on the segment and on the final objective. So that would really be the thing I would recommend there.
Great, thanks, Pierre. Kamala, what would you suggest someone do next after they get off this call? What's the first two things they should do?
Well, I think I can only add on what Pierre said. And actually, you know, to me, it's all about like, okay, what else can we get out of implementing digital product passports in our business? But also what was before mentioned, like which department is it sitting in? We are seeing a lot of challenges where everybody is just looking at the other parts of the business and where it actually should sit. So I think realizing what we can achieve with the DPP, what business models we can introduce, how can we drive our business forward, and actually, you know, planning whom should take care of it, and starting to collect the data and also start to adopt the technology. I know that there is still a lot of discussion on the granularity and the guidelines on the DPP, but we are still seeing environment where not many actually products have NFCs or QR codes that are available to be scanned. So, even exploring the technology, seeing it, of course, getting in touch with one of us would probably help. But yeah, I think that should be the first steps, the preparation, really getting to know what's more possible in that space.
Okay, great. Jeannot, what would you recommend the first two things people do after they get done with this call that they would want to do to get more ready?
Reach out to one of us to get more information. And the second, contact your local ISO group and make sure they vote, that their country will vote in favor of this ISO norm so that it happens. Very basic things, but these things need to happen first. Because if we get a no on the ISO vote, we have a problem. So get on your country side and look for the ISO group representing your country and explain them that you want this to happen.
That's a good recommendation. And Suzanne, what would be the first two things you'd ask people to do after the call? I think you're on mute.
Okay, I was. If you produce product, then which maybe do not have today is the carbon footprint of your product. So, get your heads around, how do I get the carbon footprint of my product? A lot of companies have carbon footprints, that's nice, but you have to break it down to your product. So be prepared, because that's something that you have to deliver for the product passport. Engage with your industry, because where we're now with the battery passport, the industry came together to define the needs, to define the vocabulary. So get engaged in your product segments industry to make sure that your needs are ending up kind of in those standards. Also, look at your due diligence, because that's also what you have to deliver for the product passport. So really get ready to report things you do not report today. And I'm quite positive about the technology part, because I personally believe until the product passport is coming, we will have a lot of open source technology, open standard, open source technology to allow you more or less permissionless participation at the system. So I wouldn't worry too much today about the technology, exactly how to get the wallet and how does it work, because there will be open source technology available in coming years.
Okay, that's great. All right, well, thank you. Let me go in, since we're almost at the top of the hour, let's go ahead and jump into these final closing slides. If you can go to the next slide, Carolyn. If I can ask the panelists to go on mute, we'll kind of wrap this up today. All right, so from a quick point of view, next slide, please. So if someone were to ask me what they might want to do to be prepared, obviously get involved with your standards organizations. I think Jeannot's comment about ISO is obviously very critical. We would also invite you as the NFC Forum to become a member of the NFC Forum, where we are having conversations about how NFC technology will be used and enable the DPP. We do have 4 different membership levels. We have one, actually, the adopter member does not have any annual fee, if that's something that's interested to you. If you'd like to more fully participate in the specification development process, we have paying memberships from associate to sponsor for you to become involved. Next slide, please. And again, one last thank you for all of our panelists today. I think this was a very interesting conversation, and I'm glad we were able to pull together this group, because I think we had a very wide diversity of the entire ecosystem and standards efforts and how they will all fit together at some point in the future to kind of enable the circular economy. So I do want to thank all of our panelists one last time. And the next slide, I think, is the last one. And with that, I do want to thank everyone for their time today. Have a great rest of your day. And we look forward to further conversations in 2024 on the Digital Product Passport and NFC. Have a good rest of your day.